Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to do something a little different. We're putting on our consultant hats to solve a classic business case, a real head-scratcher. We're going to dissect the problem, use a structured approach, and come up with a rock-solid recommendation for a multi-million-dollar decision.
$10 million. That's the number at the heart of this whole thing. It's the annual financial hit our client, a big bottled water company, is about to take. And why? Because their bottle supplier, a guy named Ed, wants to raise his price by just a single penny per bottle. Doesn't sound like much, does it? But when you're talking about their kind of volume, it adds up fast.
And that's the big question, isn't it? The CFO looks you right in the eye and puts it on you. This isn't just about cost anymore. It's a classic make versus buy decision. A $10 million question is hanging in the air, and we're going to solve it together, step by step. Okay, let's dive in.
To crack this, we need a roadmap. So, here's our game plan. We'll start by really nailing down the problem. Then, we'll do a quick look at the market. After that, we'll weigh the good and the bad, run the numbers for year 1, and then for year 2. And finally, we'll put it all together for the final recommendation. You gotta have a structure.
Okay, first things first. Let's get all the facts straight. As any good consultant knows, your analysis is only as good as the information you start with. We need to understand exactly what we're working with, and, more importantly, what the rules of the game are.
So here's the deal. Our client sells 1 billion bottles a year. 1 billion. That 1 cent price hike, boom, $10 million straight off the bottom line. So naturally, they're thinking, hey, maybe we should just make these things ourselves. But, and this is the absolute key to this whole thing, the CFO has a non-negotiable rule. Any big investment like this has to pay for itself in 2 years or less. That's our hurdle.
Now, before we get into the really heavy lifting on the financials, the client also wants to know where they stand in the market. This is perfect. It's a great chance to deliver some quick value and build a little momentum before we tackle the main event. It's what we call a quick win.
The question sounds simple enough, right? But there's a catch. The total market size is measured in gallons, but our client sells 0.5-liter bottles. To get a real answer, we've got to convert everything to the same unit. We've got to compare apples to apples.
All right, so here's how we get everything on the same page. The data tells us a half-liter bottle is pretty much the same as a pint. So with 8 pints in a gallon, that 4 billion gallon market becomes a 32 billion pint market. Our client's billion bottles are 1 billion pints. Suddenly the math gets real easy.
And there you have it. Once we do the math, it turns out our client has about a 3% slice of the entire US market. So they're not a huge giant, but they're definitely a serious player in a very, very big pond. Good to know.
Okay, market position, check. Now let's get back to the core decision. Before we jump back into spreadsheets, it's always a good idea to just think things through. What are the actual upsides and downsides of making our own bottles?
I mean, on the one hand, making them ourselves could be awesome. We'd have way more control over our costs, and we wouldn't have to worry about guys like Ed anymore. We might even be able to sell bottles to other companies, a whole new business. But the downsides are pretty scary. We're talking about a huge financial risk. We're a water company, not a plastics company. We have zero experience in this, and it would tie our fate to the crazy ups and downs of the oil and gas markets.
The qualitative stuff is interesting, but for a CFO, it all comes down to the dollars and cents. So let's get to it. Time to build our financial model and figure out what the cost would actually look like in the first year.
Okay, here's our framework. The outsourcing column is our baseline. If we just accept Ed's new price, it's going to cost us a clean $60 million a year. Our mission, should we choose to accept it, is to fill in all those question marks on the insourcing side. Let's start with the biggest piece of the pie, cost of goods sold, or COGS. Basically the raw plastic pellets. The info we have says that'll cost 5 cents a bottle. For 1 billion bottles, that's $50 million. Now wait a minute, think about that. The raw materials alone cost 5 cents. That's the exact same price Ed was charging for a fully finished bottle before he raised his price. That's a huge insight. All right, next we got to add in the other costs. We need people to run the factory, right? That's about $960,000 a year. And we have to ship all those plastic pellets to our new plant, which adds another $5 million. You can see how these costs are starting to pile up on top of that raw material price.
So, when you add everything up for year 1, it's not a pretty picture. The grand total to make the bottles ourselves is $67 million. That's a cost of 6.7 cents per bottle. In the very first year, we would be spending $7 million more than if we just caved and paid Ed his new price. Ouch.
So year 1 is clearly a losing proposition.
But hang on, that building and equipment, that's a one-time thing. So what happens in year 2, when we don't have those huge costs? Can we start to make up that ground and actually save some money?
Let's look at year 2. We'll assume sales grow by a healthy 5%. The big investment costs for the building and equipment are gone now, they're paid for, and suddenly the story totally flips. Buying from Ed would cost $63 million, but making them ourselves would only be about $59.75 million. Hey, that's a savings of $3.25 million for the year.
Okay, saving over $3 million in year 2 sounds pretty good, but remember the rule: the CFO is hard and fast, non-negotiable, 2-year payback rule. Is that year 2 savings enough to get us back in the black within that tight time frame?
And this is where the math gets brutal. We started in a $10 million hole from the investment. Then, in year 1, we dug that hole $7 million deeper. In year 2, we only filled it back in by $3.25 million. After 2 full years, we are still almost $14 million underwater. It doesn't just fail the payback test, it's not even in the same ballpark.
So we've done our homework. We defined the problem, sized the market, thought through the pros and cons, built a detailed financial model, and tested it against the most important rule. Now it's time to put it all together and give the CFO a clear, data-driven answer.
And our recommendation? It's simple, direct, and unambiguous. Based on the numbers and the rules we were given, the answer is a clear no. The company should not move forward with making their own bottles.
When you present this to the CFO, here's your story. You lead with the knockout punch. It completely fails the 2-year payback rule. That's the deal breaker. Then you back it up with the facts. It costs way more in year 1, and the savings in year 2 are nowhere near big enough to make up for it. The conclusion is inescapable.
And that's our deep dive. The numbers give us a clear no on this project. But a great consultant's job isn't just to say no. This entire financial model we just built, it's now a powerful weapon. We've proven that making our own bottles is a real possibility, even if it doesn't work right now. So the real question becomes, how can we use this knowledge to go back to Ed and negotiate a much better price? That's where the real value of this work comes in. Thanks for joining us on The Explainer.